Hi, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rule Talk Radio Network, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. And our mantra is educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, you are going to want to listen to this interview today because I have an exceptional guest on today. All my guests are exceptional in their own way. And I want to tell you about my guest before I introduce her. My guest today is Julie Farnham. She wrote the book, Domestic Darkness, an insider's account of the January 6th insurrection and the future of right-wing extremism. Julie Farnham is the former director of intelligence Capitol Police. She also served as assistant and acting director during one of the most tumultuous periods in this country's history. During her time there, she oversaw the identification and vetting of nearly 20,000 threats against members of Congress, most of which were made by U.S. citizens who adhere to extremist ideologies. She also warned of the potential for violence on January 6, 2021. Prior to joining the Capitol Police, Farnham served with the Department of Homeland Security for over 15 years. She holds a master's degree in intercultural relations from Lesley University and is also the author of the book, U.S. Immigration Laws Under the Threat of Terrorism. And I want to welcome Julie Farnham to Chatting with Betsy.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Julie. You are welcome. As I talked to Julie just a few minutes before this interview, and I don't usually step my toe into political waters, but I'm opening my horizons, and I found this book an eye-opener. And so I want to thank you, Julie Farnham, for writing this book. I think it was very brave and very courageous of you to do so. And you're welcome. I'm going to ask you to ask all the authors and writers that come on, what was your inspiration, motivation for writing your book, Domestic Darkness?
Well, it was a couple things. One, I saw a lot of people kind of trying to shape the narrative of January 6th and do it for political reasons rather than trying to get the truth out. And so I felt it was really important for me to write something from the inside of the Capitol Police's perspective to really explain what the failures were that day and do it in a way that, was not to try to make myself look better. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later because I'm clear about what I could have done differently as well. And really, just get the truth out there because I was hearing a lot of things that were not necessarily true and were said to try to paint certain people in a more favorable light or to try to minimize the failings of that day.
Well, you know what they say, Julie, hindsight, right, is 20/20. You look in the rearview mirror. We all do that. What could I have done better? What, could I have improved on? What did I miss? That's common, I think, in all professions. But with your job, you must have, what stress you were under. I mean, I get that from reading the book. You were under a tremendous amount of stress. And from what, and this is my own opinion, I feel, Julie, in your book, you tried to warn, Congress. You tried to warn people that are, in superiors about this. And I feel like you had to prove yourself because you're a woman. They didn't listen to you because you're a woman. Did you find that situation?
Yeah, I did. I think, when a man speaks, they are viewed as having authority and they're taken seriously. Whereas I think a lot of times when women speak, especially in male-dominated fields like law enforcement and intelligence, they're not necessarily taken seriously or seen to have credibility. And I think a lot of times women have to say the same thing over and over and over again before people start to hear what they are saying. And so that's problematic. And I think that did happen there. I think some of the aftermath of January 6th, too, where, I was really scapegoated for some of the failures. And I think some of that has to do with me being a woman, too, because I think there was an assumption that I would be quiet and that I wouldn't fight back. And I don't think they would have made that same assessment if I had been a man.
I believe you're right, because I think being a female myself, and I know not being listened to. You go to a doctor, they don't listen to you. They don't take you seriously because you're a female. And it's a known fact that doctors dismiss really women's symptoms of a heart attack because we're women. And I think a woman has to prove herself more so than a man. And, they probably think, she don't know what she's talking about. She's a woman. Women make big things out of nothing. This is probably what I'm thinking that was going on in their mind. And, of course, when the aftermath of January 6th, of course, people are going to look, who could be our scapegoat? Who can we blame it on? Maybe we should try Julie. She's a woman. Maybe she won't fight back. And I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did fight back, and you still are. You wrote this book. You want to explain your side of the story and facts that happened. And I feel bad. I have to tell you, reading this book, I felt bad for you. I really did. I'm thinking this poor woman has so much stress. She's trying to warn, of what could happen and what did happen, obviously, on January 6th. And it's like you were John the Baptist crying in the wilderness. Nobody was listening to you.
Yeah, I did feel like no one really listened to me during my time there at the Capitol Police. And I was there almost 3 years. I just left in May of 2023. So I was there a long time. And I do think I achieved what I wanted to achieve there and brought in some really good people and cleaned up the mess that I had. But, during that time, I don't ever feel like I really had a voice. And particularly towards the end, I don't think I was treated very well, and it was very dismissed, and that's unfortunate.
Yes, that is. I'm going to mention, because of being a woman and in a male-dominated field, you kind of had to put up with a lot of, I call it nonsense, men probably hitting on you, and maybe trying to see what information they could get from you. And you talk in your book about your relationship with Shane. Did you feel that he did use you, or there was really something initially there?
Well, just to give some background to listeners, so Shane is Shane Lamont, Lieutenant Shane Lamont from the D.C. Police Department, MPD, and he has been indicted for aiding the leader of the Proud Boys and then lying about it to investigators. So his trial is next month in February of 2024. And so I did have a relationship with him. I don't know if he used me or not. I would like to think that he didn't, but I don't know now. And now that everything's come to light, because I did not know of the activities, improper activities with the Proud Boys. I knew that he was talking to the leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio. I knew Tarrio was an informant, and that's like just normal, like police business. I didn't see anything inappropriate about that. But then, after I stopped seeing him romantically, it came to light that he may have given some information to Tarrio, tipped him off about being arrested, and other things that were not appropriate. So I don't know. I mean, when I think about that, it kind of makes my head spin a little bit, because I think, like, well, did I miss something? And, like, where did I go wrong? And should I have, like, not entered that relationship? Because I did like him. I originally went out with him because I wanted to build that relationship with MPD, because I didn't really know that world. I had worked for Homeland Security, and I was like familiar with like the intelligence community, like national security world, but I was not so involved in like the law enforcement world. And so, but when I went out with him, I liked him, and I liked him. So, we continued our relationship for about 5 or 6 months. And so I don't know if he initially showed interest in me because he wanted information or he wanted to use me or manipulate me. And, I think a lot of women end up in relationships where they are used. It just happens to be that mine is like in a very public way with some very very bad people.
Yes. And I have to ask you this because I don't remember if it's in your book or not, but as a woman and you're in the spotlight, how do you protect your children from the negative press that is being said about you? And, they could hear it or their friends at school might say something.
Yeah, I mean, my girls are young. I have 2 daughters. They're 8 and 9 years old. So I don't know if they know about all the media stuff.
They're young. Okay.
They're young, so
they're very young.
They're just learning to read, so they're not reading the newspaper quite yet.
Okay. I forgot how old your daughters were.
No, that's okay. But they do know, like, my youngest daughter, like, she saw what happened on January 6th, and there, are frequently incidents at the Capitol and were during the time that I was there. And she saw some of that stuff on the news, and she knew I worked at the Capitol. And she had told me that she was worried that I was not safe at work. And I even took her to work one day, and she said she didn't want to go. And I said, why don't you want to go? Because I had taken her to work when I worked at DHS with some regularity. She's like, no, it's dangerous there. So she definitely had, like, the acknowledgement that it was sometimes not a good situation at work. And so trying to just, comfort her and assure her that I will be okay, even though there were some times that I went to work and I wasn't sure if I would be okay. But, of course, you can't tell your children that.
Right. Which leads me to my next question. That had to be, for lack of a better word, so wild on January 6th. What was your, as you could tell the audience, your feelings, when you saw what was going on? And were you aware through communication exactly what was going on, or did you find some things out afterwards? Because that had to be scary. I mean, I would be frightened if I was there.
Yeah, it was scary. My office is located about 2 blocks or so from the Capitol. It's on the Capitol complex. And if you haven't been to Washington, D.C., there's the Capitol building itself, which, is a huge building, but there's several other buildings on the Capitol complex. Like there's 3 Senate buildings, 3 House buildings, 3 library buildings, and then a few other buildings. And I was in the Capitol Police Headquarters building, which is next to the Dirksen Senate office building. So I was seeing, like, what was happening. I was also listening to the police radio in addition to, like, watching videos of what was happening in real time. And it was a frightening situation. But I think at the time, too, I didn't fully process everything that was going on because I was so, like, in the moment and just had to, like, do what needed to be done that day. And so it wasn't until, like, after the fact that I started to realize, like, wow, this really was bad. And I remember, and I relay in the book, too, I asked my mom, I said, Mom, did people think this was bad? Because I really didn't have that perspective because I was so involved and, like, there in the moment. And she said, that's the only thing that people are talking about on television right now. And I said, oh, okay. And then I had a friend from Japan text me, and he's like, are you okay? I was like, oh, okay, if people in Japan are talking about this, then I guess it is a big deal.
Yeah, well, I could tell you, Julia, my mom was 91 years old at the time, and my mom said to me she was frightened. It reminded her of World War II, reminded her of Hitler taking over.
It was not a good day in our history at all.
She was scared. Now, before people take me the wrong way, I'm not saying anybody was or is like Hitler. I'm stating what my mother felt at the time that she witnessed this, who grew up during World War II. I was amazed in your book. I mean, I heard of some of the groups, the extremist groups, and the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys. I heard of them. How do you pronounce this? QAnon?
QAnon.
Is that how you pronounce QAnon? QAnon. I heard of them, and there's just so many far extremists. I don't even like to call them right wing. I think they're just extremist ideology, and like what attracts these people to them other than fitting into a group or being part of something. This is scary because they are on the internet recruiting people.
Yeah, they are. The different groups that were present, bless you, they have different ideologies. So, you have your white supremacists and your neo-Nazis, and they're, racially and ethnically motivated. And then you have your militia, anti-government types like your Oath Keepers. And then you have QAnon, which is like more conspiracy theories. So they have different ideologies. But I do think that someone would join an extremist group regardless of the ideology for similar reasons why someone would join a gang. And you touched upon it in your question that, it comes down to something's missing from their life. And they either need, bless you, that companionship or that sense of purpose because they're not getting it from, positive means within their life. And that's unfortunate, and that's what makes it challenging. And I think, we're also coming off a time where we had a pandemic and people were very isolated and people were talking to others on the internet. And the internet is, and social media in particular, you are talking into an echo chamber because if someone disagrees with you, you can block them, you can silence them very, very quickly. So you're only talking to people who think like you, and no one's really challenging you to think differently or question what you're saying or what you believe. And so that sense then it fuels and it reiterates some of this extremist ideology. And so I think that did play a role in it too.
Yes, I agree. I always say on a lot of my shows, Julie, that parents, guardians, if you're in charge of children and raising them, please keep an eye on who they're talking to on the internet. Do not cut off communication with your children because they will go to these extremist groups for that connection. And you don't want that as a parent or guardian because they will seek acceptance somewhere.
Yes.
And to feel part of something. And I think that's a big factor in that, being part of a group. And, people who are easily manipulated. And I think that a lot of these groups look for people who they can manipulate.
Right, absolutely.
You see that. What is scary is this rise in I call it home terrorism. What's your opinion on that, Julie? Why are we seeing such an increase of these groups and domestic terrorism? That's what it's called.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think I think it's a couple things. I think one, we have leaders in the government and in our communities who took these fringe groups, whether it be on the right or the left, they took these fringe groups and they brought them into the fold and brought them into the mainstream and gave them a platform to spread their ideology and to spread their hate. So it created a level of acceptance for these groups, and therefore they got more exposure, and that helps with recruitment and makes people think yes, it is okay to join some of these groups and to believe these hateful things. And that's why I think we've seen a rise. I mean, since January 6th, not all the groups have fared the same way. The organizational structure of the Proud Boys has changed and shifted more from a national model to more local chapters. And the Oath Keepers is they are not as active anymore because they had such a central leader who's now in prison that they are not doing, or not as active as they were before. But these white supremacist groups, they have really flourished. And they've changed their tactics a little bit in that they try to be more integrated into the community to make them more, appear to be more acceptable. So they'll be doing like public service and things like that. But they're still very dangerous, and they can still lead to violence.
Yes, years ago, I don't even remember the name of the movie. I think Jeff Bridges was in it, but it's about domestic terrorism and how they just, this family was in a neighborhood, but they had that, way off theories and how they just blended in, and then they made the person who was, quote unquote, normal, made him look like the terrorist because they set him up. It's just, it might have seemed far-fetched back in the 90s, but it's not. It's not now at all.
No.
That story, not far-fetched at all. Wish I could remember the name of the movie, but I don't remember it. It was a long time ago. I'd like to ask you your opinion. Do you think, in your opinion, that we learned from January 6th so we don't have that to happen again, especially with the election year coming up, which should be very interesting?
Yeah, I don't think we have fully learned our lessons as a country. I mean, I think the Capitol Police will be better prepared this January 6th, 2025. Like, they'll be ready for that. I don't know how well they are prepared for other types of threats. I actually think the biggest threat right now is going to be violence against an elected official or a candidate. I think we're going to see like a lone wolf or something like that. We have seen it. We saw it with Gabby Giffords. We saw it with some others as well. So I think that's probably the most prominent threat. But, I mean, as far as January 6th goes, we're still a very, very divided country, unfortunately. And I don't see, Congress as a whole, not naming any political parties or any specific members, Congress as a whole is really dysfunctional right now. They're not doing their job, and they're not passing legislation. They're not working to help the American people in large part. And we see this, with the budget things that are going on, and, we're always worried about a shutdown. That's Congress not doing their job, and that has real impact on everyday American people. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, because I don't see enough people in public office willing to come together, willing to talk productively about their differences, and finding common ground and working together. We're not seeing that. And that's where I think we haven't learned our lesson, because I think that's largely contributed to what happened on January 6th.
I agree, Julie. I think, gone are the days when the left and the right would, talk and hash things out. You're not going to agree with everything, both sides are not going to agree on everything, but come to a middle ground, work together for the better solution for the American people, because it's out of control.
It is.
I just think that people need to just, forget Republican, Democrat. We're all Americans. Let's work together to have a better life. That's how I feel. It's really it's a sad shape of affairs, really, what's going on, and it's very disturbing to me of what I see going on, and these groups. You really have to be careful. You just really don't know who your neighbor is anymore, or who knows who. Have you ever received death threats? Because I know a lot of people have.
I have. During my time at the Capitol Police, bless you, I did get one mailed to my house, which is scary.
Oh, my God.
And then I'm running for office here in Arlington, Virginia, and when I announced that first week, I received 7 death threats. And so that's scary because, as you mentioned, like I have small children, but at the same time, I'm not going to be intimidated by extremist elements of our country. Like I know what I'm doing is right. I know I'm trying to do good, and I'm, serving my community in like a positive way. And so I'm not going to be intimidated by their threats.
Well, good for you, and I hope you have a really good security team working with you. That has to be scary. You don't want to be intimidated. You want to serve the people, and yet you have to protect yourself and your children. That's like I give you a lot of credit because to me that's a fine line. Like, you want to help people, you want to serve your community. And nobody should be threatened because they want to do that. And no matter who you are, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever you are, I don't care about your ethnic background, everybody has a right to feel safe in their environment.
Yeah, you're right. And then Arlington Police Department has been wonderful, and they've been really, really helpful. And they're just an overall, like in contrast to the Capitol Police, the Arlington Police Department is an overall, like really well-run, good police department and great leadership.
And from the book, you see a lot of threats, 20,000 threats against members of Congress. You're one busy woman. It's one busy agency. How do you determine what is, for lack of a better term, real and what isn't? Like, to put extra security on somebody or to warn, to warn them?
So most of those threats are made on social media. So my time at the Capitol Police a lot of my time is spent trying to identify who made those threats. So that's what we would do. And then you have to look at the context of it. You have to look to see, are they making other threats? Do they seem like they're mentally stable? Because sometimes you read these threats and you're like, this person has like serious mental health issues. And that doesn't mean that they won't be prosecuted or they won't be investigated, but it's good for the agents who do those investigations to have that heads up. And maybe sometimes it is a matter of working with mental health professionals to get the people the treatment that they need and the help that they need. But other times it's just people who adhere to extremist ideologies, and that can be quite dangerous because, some of those threats could turn into violence. So you have to take it all into consideration. But it is a huge number of threats, and the Capitol Police has a relatively small investigations division, and only 10 people, and this is public information, only 10 members of Congress receive protection details, and it's just the leadership of Congress, so 5 on the Senate side, 5 on the House side. Everyone else really has to fend for themselves, and we're in, as you mentioned, a very dangerous state of being right now in this country, particularly as it pertains to elected officials, and so it's worrisome.
Yes, it is, and even the Supreme Court justices were threatened. So it is. That can be scary. I know I'm more alert to my surroundings where I am, and it's really sad that we have to teach our children what to do if there's an active shooter. And you read about these violence that happens. People just go crazy and kill people and then themselves. Where do they miss the boat? Because a lot of times there were warning signs of, their mental health, needing mental health professional care. And I think we need to be more observant. If parents, guardians see something amiss, take your child. Of course, if they're over 18, there's nothing you could do about it because you're not in charge of them. But, encourage them to seek mental health care. Call the police. Do something.
And the police can get temporary hold if people are having mental health crises. There's or at least here in Virginia. I'm sure there's other states that have something similar. But, at the end of the book, I list some recommendations about what we can do. And one of them does relate to that and to making sure that we have tools in place to recognize when someone is potentially going to commit violence. The federal government has indicators book that lists like 40-something indicators of someone who may be moved to commit violent acts. But that's not easily digestible. That's like 40 things. That's hard for people to remember. So I really do think that, and what I recommend in the book is that the country has a campaign, something similar to See Something, Say Something. Like if you think someone is going to commit a violent act, then you need to speak up and you need to get the police involved or mental health professionals involved to try to prevent that, because we don't want to see, more acts of violence, more mass shootings, things like that. We don't want to see that.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Julie, as we come to an end, and I didn't discuss a lot of what I wanted to discuss, but I let the conversation go where it goes. What would you like the readers to take away from your book, to learn from your book?
I would like for them to recognize that January 6th really was a bad day, and the lessons that we can learn from that day as a country. I'd also like for them to recognize that there is hate amongst us, and it's our duty as Americans to speak out against hate, because as you mentioned, everyone deserves to feel safe in their communities. But not only that, hate never solves any problems. It just creates more. And so to protect our democracy, I think we really need to acknowledge where we are as a country right now and to take steps individually and collectively to try to make our country better.
Oh, that is wonderful, and I agree 100%. Julie, where can people get in touch with you, connect with you?
I have a website. It's julieforarlington.com, and my email and contact information is there.
Great. And where can people purchase your book, Domestic Darkness?
Anywhere you buy books, either your local bookstore or some of the bigger outlets as well. Both will have them.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you, Julie Farnham, for coming on Chatting with Betsy, writing your book. I think you're a very brave woman. I give you a lot of kudos for speaking up, writing this book. I know it probably wasn't easy, and, being attacked on social media. In my opinion, you're one strong woman. It takes a strong woman to do what you've done, and as I like to say, you're a badass. In a good way. It's very easy to go in a corner and say, okay, I'm not going to speak up, I'm not going to tell my side, but you did. And I've seen you on the news, and I'm like, wow, and here I am talking to you. So I just thank you for coming on, and good luck to you as you run for office. And folks, the name of the book, and I like the cover too because it's dark, and then you see a little bit of the Capitol building, like a column broken, and then little pieces. But the name of the book is Domestic Darkness, an insider's account of the January 6th insurrection and the future of right-wing extremism. Julie Farnham, that's Farnam, former Director of Intelligence, Capitol Police. So thank you for everything that you do. Good luck to you in your run for office. And thanks again for opening up my eyes. And folks, I just want to encourage the audience, have an open mind. I was really excited to read this book and have an open mind about it. So have an open mind. Don't be easily swayed one way or the other, but just open your eyes to different people's opinions and views, and then decide for yourself. That's what I say. That's my That's my opinion. But thank you, Julie, again for coming on. I wish you much success on your book and
Thank you
your
so much.
career in politics. You're welcome. Folks, all the information will be in the blog that Jeannie White, who's station manager, writes, and Jeannie produces the show. So thank Jeannie for doing all she does. And thank you to Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO of Passionate Rural Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And thank you for listening and subscribing to Chatting with Betsy. It is for free on iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, and Amazon Music. And I have wonderful guests. You don't want to miss an episode. And I also want to say that you can follow me on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, W-U-R-Z-E-L. And I have a support group, #Kick Alzheimer's Death Movement, if you are a caregiver and need support. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you can be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need that now more than ever. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rural Talk Radio. Bye-bye now.